Good afternoon, everybody. Well, I think it's afternoon. No, it's actually morning still. I haven't done a morning video, at least not very many lately. I used to wake up and do sunrise videos like 5 years ago at work, and like film the sunrise and talk about, general things. And it's just funny to think of how much time has passed. And in all these years of making videos, so many different subjects have crossed my mind, and there's so many different things that I've been fascinated with that I've wanted to share with all of you. And, it's been, around 7 years now. It's just mind-blowing to me that I made videos that long. And there were times when I thought, why do I waste time making videos about, these subjects? What is the point, Why can't I, or why don't I, use that time to do something else more constructive, or, get a few things done, or, with my kids, I'm raising kids. And basically the whole time I've had my channel, it wasn't too long after my first son that I really started using my channel to talk about things. And then as the time passed, I realized I'm so grateful that I did. I'm so grateful that I have talked with people, because ultimately, to me, the meaning of life is to share ideas and information and explore possibilities with other people. Therefore, future generations can benefit. And it's kind of arrogant to assume that one person really has any answers. Of course, I'm not saying that I'm here giving you information that you couldn't get elsewhere. That's not the point. There are some people who take it to that extent where they're, hey, I'm a guru and I'm going to give you the answers and the truth. I feel none of that. In fact, I have more of a, self-doubt than may come across in my videos. But that's part of my strength. That's part of what helps me to move forward. And instead of looking at the mistakes I've made, or the lack of effort I've put in certain realms, I say, well, today is a new day, and I can start that today. Retrospect, hindsight's 20/20. It's useless to sit and worry about what we could have done with our lives, or the things we should have done. But really what I'm here to talk about is the complex relationship that we have with, these spiritual ideas of a disembodied consciousness, or maybe a conscious universe itself. When you get into the realms of talking about these things, you end up talking about God, and then people instantly are turned off because you use the word God. And I know that because for so many years, if anyone even used that word, I would just, I couldn't handle it. I was like, I'm not going to talk about religion. And when I started, when I got older, talking with people that say, no, it doesn't have to be defined as a religious thing, that the universe itself is conscious. And I would think, well, that's a great idea, but how much truth really is that to there, and do we have any evidence for it? For me, I'm a skeptic, but I'm also a believer in universal consciousness. Not because it's just comforting, but rather because I've seen it so many different ways, and so many facets of this reality. Whether it be not just in a psychedelic journey. When I was younger and I started taking psychedelics, that's, I put myself in a state where I could see these equations and these ideas, and I could see these metaphors, these archetypes, all right there so clear in my mind. And it's interesting because somebody just made a video I watched earlier about this, about psychedelics and his trip, and how it had put him in for a year or so afterwards, he was kind of, when you come back to reality after you've seen certain things that you can't bring back into this reality, you have a cognitive dissonance. You have a heart that tells you, I want to just be a free spirit, I want to go out and share and do all these great things with my life. Then you have a part of you that also says, but what is the true job of a human being? Is it to do what we want? Of course not. Because if we're living within the realm of, if we observe nature and see the way nature operates to the best of our ability, the closer we look, the more we see that nature isn't struggling. Okay, nature doesn't struggle the way that we like to think it was. It's not a huge competition. It's a symbiosis. It's a relationship between plants, animals, species. It extends down into the bacterial and viral realms, which is what I originally wanted to talk about in this video, but I might just save it for another one. It's because I made a video a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. It's called Are Bacteria Our Gods? And it was kind of a joke and just like a look into this idea. I was thinking that when I realized that we have more bacteria in our body than our own cells, it was kind of mind-blowing for me. And I started thinking, well, if we're walking bags of bacteria, are we just doing their bidding? I mean, and there are various viruses and certain diseases that can cause people's minds to change. If you know what cordyceps does to an ant's brain, it's an amazing story, but I won't get into that because basically there are many parasites, many viruses that actually change the thinking of their host and cause them to do things they wouldn't normally do. For example, the one Toxoplasma gondii, which is found in cat feces, which is why they say you shouldn't mess with them. It gets into the brains of rodents, and it makes them sexually attracted to cat urine and not afraid of cats. Very specific thing that it does. How does it do it? How does it know to do this? How does a fungus land on an ant and explode the spore, enter the bloodstream, go to the head, tell them to climb down the canopy, go across the forest floor, climb up on a plant to 3 feet high, go out on the underside of a leaf, clamp onto it, and then die, so it can release more spores and start the life cycle. The thing is, we see these things, but we don't give enough credibility to the idea that these are not thinking beings. These are, when you talk about an ant colony, we can explain how they all operate by the fact that they release, their pheromones, and that they can read their chemical signals of their partners. If one's not encountering as many workers anymore because a bunch were killed, they will change from, say, a soldier into a worker, or vice versa. We still don't quite understand how it all goes together, but there seems to be a mind at work here. But we can explain it by saying, well, these are beings, these are even insects. Maybe they have enough brain cells to be able to do what they need to do. But how does a virus know what to do? How does a virus even reproduce? Well, it doesn't have its own reproduction. It can't reproduce on its own. So it finds a host cell, and sometimes that's a bacteria, which is what they call phages. These are viruses that attack bacteria and kill them. In the rest of the developing world, they're using phages to fight things like MRSA. But in America, we're not using these. We're still using antibiotics. Why? Because you can patent an antibiotic, and you cannot patent a virus. So the rest of the world is going on with, helping to cure some of these things, but getting kind of off track here. My point here is that I went from thinking our bacteria our gods to are viruses our gods? They used to think viruses came later in the evolutionary chain, that they were just kind of a byproduct, maybe a cell that lost the ability to reproduce. But now they found, just in the last decade, they found a virus, the Mimi virus, which is way bigger than any other virus, and it's actually larger than some bacteria, and it has its own ability to reproduce. And I know that anybody who listens to this is thinking, so what, a virus? I don't even know anything about viruses. Well, neither did I, and that's why I'm fascinated with it, because now they're thinking that viruses may have been the evolutionary movers, if you will. For example, there's a virus that has to be present in the womb of a. They could only use a sheep, couldn't do this on a human, but they did 2 separate studies where there was a virus found in the womb that when they removed it, it didn't allow the fetus to attach to the placenta. And it was required for that these viruses help us to function. Well, the bacteria do the same thing in our gut. Now we're just learning about the microbiome and finding out the worst thing that we're doing for ourselves is using hand sanitizers and being overly clean, which is why I'll probably make, this video will probably be kind of multi-part, but there's just so many things I wanted to talk about. It's not just the bacteria that rule our bodies too, it's worms. I even saw a show the other day about parasitic worms and how in areas that have less parasitic worms, multiple sclerosis damage is higher, nerve damage is higher, people have higher incidences of asthma and allergies, and this is just coming into the limelight. So the reason why I'm bringing this forward in a video about life is to ask, what are we supposed to be doing? Well, we don't know. What is God, or what is our purpose here? We don't know, but we know we are walking bags of bacteria, viruses, which outnumber anything on Earth by multitudes. And in fact, an amazing fact that I heard the other day was that if you took all the viruses just in the ocean and lined them up end to end, they would cross the Milky Way galaxy. I think it was like 25 million light years or something. It was just mind-blowing. Viruses are like the little mechanics, if you will, and they adjust the way that They can even, attack like algae and certain bacteria, cyanobacteria, like in the ocean, that fix carbon dioxide. In other words, they think viruses may be contributing to global warming now. And it's insane. It's insane, all the things that we're learning, but what we're learning mostly is that our bodies aren't just our bodies. They are a collection of various entities, beings, creatures. And if these creatures are truly conscious on a world scale, if they have a hive mind, just like ants do, and like bees, for example, the way that even the way that birds flock together, and they're not necessarily, it's more complex. They're not all working on the same brain. They're watching one another and all moving as kind of a morphing group. And that's kind of the metaphor I think of for other things like viruses. They may become plentiful in a time when something is overpopulated. So if humans are overburdening the world, we're going to naturally encounter lots more of these viruses and bacterial infections and diseases, because the Earth's trying to balance itself out. At least that's my belief. And that's the Gaian hypothesis, which means that, it depends on whether or not you believe that the Earth is conscious or not. I believe that there's no way it couldn't be. Things down to the smallest level. Things like viruses know what to do. Humans are complete different level from those viruses. But we find we know what to do. Animals know what to do. We have these instincts and intuitions that push us forward. Well, why wouldn't something larger? What consists of I think that something like the Earth fits like 17 of the 18 characteristics of a living being. The only one that the Earth doesn't have is reproduction. And that's what led me into the thought of, well, what if viruses evolved on the Earth and created these bags of flesh over time to evolve these, two-handed bipedal creatures in order to build space shuttles to get them to other planets and other corners of the universe? It sounds so far-fetched and preposterous, but why couldn't it be possible? So this brings me back to our purpose as humans. If we observe other animals, we see that they raise their young, and to a certain point, they are doting most, are loving parents. I mean, there's a lot of brain chemistry that goes with love. It's caused by certain, oxytocin and vasopressin, which there are animals which are in the same family, which some of them are doting parents that are together forever and monogamous, and other ones who aren't. They'll have sex, then fight and take off. And they found out that there was a certain suppressed gene in this particular breed that doesn't mate for life, that there's a certain gene that's turned on and off for love, if you will. Basically what it is you can turn on or off the receptors that allow to absorb vasopressin or oxytocin, the love chemicals. This isn't to belittle or minimize love, because love is an amazing emotion. It's part of what we have and who we are. But you also have what they say, like tough love. Like a bird will protect their young with their life. But the minute the young are old enough, they kick them right out of the nest. And then they go on with doing what they have to do next. Being a parent today requires a lot more time. That's the question is, why do humans spend so much longer raising our young? And why do our young need so much more care than other creatures? And that's what led me to my own theory about why it's so hard to find our own way in life, when what we're here is to share and teach each other, if you will. That it seems to be humanity's best bet to improve our future is to try to educate ourselves and teach one another as best we can, to reconcile the fact that we have to deal with being alive and not knowing all the answers to the questions that we have without going completely insane. But without wandering off as a mountain guru, because not everybody can do that. But also, or the monk, whatever, but also not becoming a slave to the grind. But there's a big difference between being a free spirit and a free soul and doing what you want and completely abandoning your responsibilities as a human being. Because as community, we're here to help each other. It's the best thing that we can do. It's the only thing that we know will actually help all people, is altruism. The materialist mindset that I've got to get mine is, it's only true to an extent. Once you've learned to live with what you have and you can function and you're fed, if we put as much energy into trying to help the world as we did is trying to help ourselves, then you know, maybe we'd be a happier species. But that's a huge thing to say. I mean, I'm not just saying, let's just help the world, because one of the most complicated things is finding out what to do. What does the world need? You know, we don't need more iPhone covers. We don't need more iPhones. You know, we don't need more products. We need more ideas. We need better ways of thinking. And that's why we're all here sharing these ideas. And that's why, to me, living in today's world it's an honor to be able to live in a day and age where things may be confusing and chaotic, but where we can share things openly, at least in the Western world, where we're not afraid to express how we feel, where I can say anything I want and feel fairly confident that I'll be okay, regardless of how I feel or what I say. I'm not tied down to a religion. I'm not tied down to a political belief system. And that's one of the hardest things, is that we're always trying to identify each other's position. Like, often people will ask me, well, are you an existentialist, or are you a nihilist? Or, like, I'm a nothingist. I'm a carpoist. I have my own theories based on what I see around me in the world. They may fit characteristics of some of these, but why try to define it? Well, because it helps us to connect and understand where another person's coming from. Because language is important. And so that's what I'd like to leave on, is the idea of language as being some sort of a barrier to true human communication. I've talked to some people who believe that language is just a process of us, that we lost our ability to communicate through thought, and that we had to develop a language and writing in order, but that's not the ultimate be-all, end-all. In my belief, after thinking about it, it really is. Carving things in stone, something set in stone, as a metaphor and literally, is something that can be seen for future generations. If you pass an idea psychically to someone else, and they pass it down the line, it's no better than the kindergarten problem where you whisper a story to each other's ear, and by the time it gets to the end, it's totally twisted. It's one thing to have two people understand what each other are thinking, but it's another thing for them to both write it down and say, let's be sure. And that's the only way we got to where we are as a species right now, is learning how to write. So we can write our ideas down and pass that on. And now I have video in the same way, that this digital format will probably get lost to time eventually. But if I were to carve it into the right stone at the right place, it would be left forever, you know, to an extent. I mean, but everything eventually becomes ash. It becomes dust. And that's okay. That's the reality we have to come to, is that no matter what we think about the earth, or how many lives we may live on the earth, in the end it's all going to go by the wayside, and that we will go back to source, whatever that may be. And that's okay. That's okay. That's, for me, just finding the reality that life is what it is, and to make the best of it while I'm here, means that I have to decide for myself what to do. And the true things that make me feel good are being part of other people's lives, but I'm still working on that like everyone else, you know, trying to, you know, get rid of my, you know, hedonistic ideals from when I was younger, and to really try to give myself to the world, to the universe, but in a way that I can still be content and happy in my life. It's complicated being human. Hopefully I've put something of value here. If anyone has any comments or questions, feel free to ask, and I'll talk to y'all later. Have a good day.